Good afternoon, everyone. We'll give folks another minute or so to log on to the webinar, then we'll get started. Good afternoon, everyone. This is the webinar covering reporting as part of the HMIS Data Standards Update for 2024. Welcome. We'll start the webinar now. Thank you for joining us. On the call today from All Chicago's HMIS team are myself, Mike Corcoran. I'm the Director of Information Services, in overall charge of the HMIS for the Chicago CoC. Joining me from our staff is Alexander Fuller, our HMIS analyst, who will be doing most of the detail presentation, and Rochelle Fajardo, who is our training coordinator. Some notes on the webinar setup. Non-presenters are muted. If you have questions, please use the questions area in the control panel to the left of your screen. We'll answer as many of those in real time as possible. If you click the arrow to expand the questions thing, you should have an area where you can type your question in a text area and click send. And all the materials we cover today and a recording of this webinar were made available via URL link that we'll send out once the recording is made available to us. So here's the agenda we'll go through, and we'll just do a quick overview for those of you who are unfamiliar with housing management information, homeless management information systems, and this whole data standards update process. We can go to the next slide. So what's happening, right? And why is it happening, and why are we having this conversation? And for those of you who were at the morning session, this is a duplicate of the material covered there. We want to make sure everybody has access to the same material. We don't know that everybody was attending both sessions. So the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, HUD, mandates that all continuums of care must use the Homeless Management Information System, an HMIS. The HMIS must follow the data standards for an HMIS published by HUD. Those data standards define what the HMIS is and how it operates. In most cases, that's very strictly defined, and we don't have a lot of opportunity to customize or change it. And those data standards are updated every 2 years at the start of the fiscal year. And fiscal year 2024 begins on October 1st of this year. And fiscal year 2024 and all the even numbered years are the 2-year cycle when the data standards are updated. And HUD also mandates the new data standards can't be implemented in the HMIS prior to the start of the fiscal year. So it's a hard cutover. On September 30th, we'll be running the 2022 data standards, and on October 1st, we'll be running the 2024 data standards. So on October 1st, those changes will be implemented in our HMIS so that we're running those 2024 data standards. I misspoke, it's actually 2022 data standards we're currently on. Next slide, please. So HUD publishes this calendar of how the process goes. Basically, in the March timeframe, they decide what the new data standards will be on a finalized basis. They release that in April to the software vendors who update and manage the HMIS systems. In May, they release it to the general public, which is when we first saw it. The vendors work on updating their systems. In September, HUD recommends that they provide a test site to communities. That test site was made available to us late at the end of last week, so we really got access to it on Tuesday. And on October 1st, the data standards go live for all communities. Also, SAGE, the reporting portal for APRs and CAPRs and coordinate entry APRs, will also be updated, and we'll talk about that more. But just be aware that the file that you dump out from the HMIS with your APR data has to be the same data standard as what SAGE is running to upload it. So if you dump out your APR on Friday, September 29th, and you try to upload it on Monday, October 2nd, it won't work because the file is not in the correct format for the 2024 data standards. And we'll say more about that as we go through the rest of the material. So the HUD calendar again, this is really the Chicago calendar outside of the HUD calendar. In May and July, we presented and reviewed the data standards changes with the agency technical administrators. We published in the CoC newsletter links to the HUD exchange materials for the 2024 data standards. And now in September, we're doing a number of activities. We got access, as I said, on Tuesday to the sandbox of our HMIS with the 2024 update. Today, we're holding webinars for HMIS users in the community. Over the next several weeks, we can meet with any interested agencies to review their data collection and other affected processes. So if you'd like us to consult with you on any changes that need to be made to your data collection or reporting processes, please let us know. We'd like you to use this material within your agencies to assess and implement whatever changes are necessary so that you're collecting and reporting data according to the new data standards. Between now and the end of the month, we'll be determining what changes are required to custom assessments that we have in the community. Similarly, changes to custom reports within the community. And we'll try to put as many of those changes into place that won't break those reports between now and the end of the month. So it's a little less that we have to do once the new system is in place to make those reports available and functional. We're recommending that agencies run and upload their APRs by Friday the 29th for anything that's due the first week of October, things like that, for the reasons I mentioned earlier, that you'll avoid any issues that might arise as a result of the data standards updates. And we're recommending that we run operational reports that normally go out on Mondays on the 30th of September, on that Saturday, to distribute. So again, if there's any issues with system availability, reports for things like coordinated entry and other active list and other kinds of reports that people use won't be delayed if we run into any kinds of problems. And then on October 1st is when sort of a flurry of activity happens. The vendor will update our HMIS to the 2024 data standard. They have not told us a schedule when they believe that will be completed. Part of that is to actually update and migrate data to reflect the new data standards. And again, they haven't given us a schedule of when that would be completed. And then they'll make the system available for us to use. Same thing, we don't know exact time or date of that. And then we start in our work of updating the custom assessments, updating the project data that needs to be updated, update the custom reporting, and then once all, in particular, the project data and the assessments, once that stuff is complete, we can make the system available to the community. The reporting piece may take a little longer, and we will keep everybody updated on how that's progressing. The main message being, since there's so much uncertainty in terms of our vendor schedule, and because we can't let users onto the system until we make the updates to the projects and custom assessments and things like that, we can't let users onto the system because otherwise data would be entered incorrectly. The HMIS may not be available on October 1st for user access. Dana, to your question, we're having discussions with DFSS about what their schedule and time frame would be for running the reports that are due the week of October 1st. Those conversations are ongoing, so I don't have an answer for you right away, but there are discussions to account for that and make sure that that data can get put in. I'm showing that I'm not coming through audio-wise, so let me see if I can increase the volume on my speaker. Okay, we'll see if that helps at all. And so with that, I will turn it over to Alex. So hopefully my microphone won't matter that much anymore, and he can go through the rest of the detailed changes.
Okay, thank you, Mike. So for the next couple of slides, we're going to go through things that have changed within the data standards. So the first thing we're going to look at is project information. There's two project types that will have changes. One would be an emergency shelter, and the second would be rapid rehousing. So for emergency shelter projects currently that have a tracking method of night by night, will be migrated to or mapped to the emergency shelter night by night new project type. And it'll be the same for emergency shelters with a tracking method of entry and exit will also be mapped to emergency shelter entry and exit. For rapid rehousing projects, overall, the project type will remain the same. What will change is that there will be a new subtype for rapid rehousing projects, which identify if the rapid rehousing project is services only, or if the rapid rehousing project provides housing with or without services. Okay. The next piece that we're going to look at is race and ethnicity. This is going to be the biggest change to the data standards. So as mentioned in the first webinar, but I'll mention it here, is that there's going to be a new field in which is going to be multi-select. So you'll be able to select a combination of races, as well as the ethnicity question is going to be added into it. So overall, the only thing that will be added from the ethnicity is going to be Hispanic. So there's no longer going to be an option for non-Hispanic to be selected for clients. If someone is identified as Hispanic, that will be added to their multi-selection of race once it's mapped over. I'll show some examples in the next slide of how that will look. And then the impact of this change would be to groupings of multi-race in reporting. So the way that this is going to map over is that if Hispanic is selected for ethnicity, it will be mapped to the new Hispanic question in race and ethnicity. This is only mapping from ethnicity. None of the other values, including non-Hispanic, will be mapped over. Values for primary race and secondary race will be mapped to the new pick list. Additional values will be mapped, or actual values will be mapped rather than the explanations for missing race. So client doesn't know, client preferred not to answer, and data not collected. Those answers will not be mapped over. So with that, you should review this with your clients or your active clients the next time you encounter them or next time you come in contact with them, just to verify that the mapping is still accurate to what the client wants to have their race and ethnicity as. So in this example, on the left side, we have the current instance of service point with the 2022 data standards. And on the right-hand side, we have a screenshot of what the race and ethnicity field will look like in service point with the 2024 data standard changes. So as you can see on the left-hand side, we have race, secondary race, and ethnicity being separate questions. And then on the right side, that will be mapped over to just one question. So for primary race, we have selected American Indian. Secondary race, we have Black, ethnicity, non-Hispanic. So the way that that's going to map over and look in the new data standards would be American Indian, and Black would be the only thing selected. Since non-Hispanic isn't an answer that's going to be moved over to the race and ethnicity question, that's not going to be included in the mapping. So I have two more examples. So at the one on the top, we have white, secondary race, client doesn't know, and ethnicity is Hispanic. So again, since client doesn't know isn't going to be pulled over, the only thing that will show is Hispanic and white. And then in the second example, for primary and secondary race, we have client doesn't know, but the ethnicity is Hispanic. So the way that that's going to map over is that the only thing that will be displayed is Hispanic in the race and ethnicity field. Take a moment for any questions. Okay, so I have just kind of one chart or two charts here that just shows a better visual of how the mapping will work. So in 2022, we have any values, non-Hispanic as being the ethnicity. So what would be pulled into the 2024 race and ethnicity would just only be the race values. Not client doesn't know, client refused, data not collected. As the race and then ethnicity being Hispanic, only the race values and the Hispanic value from ethnicity will be pulled over. And then we have client doesn't know, client refused, data not collected, and then Hispanic. So since those aren't being mapped over, only Hispanic will be represented in the new race and ethnicity field. So at the bottom, we just have some examples of how that works. So Black African American, non-Hispanic will be mapped to just Black African American. White Hispanic will be mapped to white Hispanic. And then data not collected Hispanic will be mapped to just Hispanic. So we do have one question. If you select client doesn't know, will that count as a data error once it is mapped over? So how HUD views these hasn't changed. So client doesn't know, client refused, data not collected is still considered missing data. So that hasn't changed with the wording changes. And then again, client refused has changed to client prefers not to answer. That's a wording change. Okay, so the next thing we're going to talk about is gender. So female has been moved over or mapped over to women, girl if child. Male has been mapped over to man, boy if child. Gender other than singularly female or male has been renamed to non-binary, and culturally specific identity and different identity are two new gender options to choose from. With choosing different identity, there is a different identity text field in which you can indicate what that identity is. Okay, so here's a couple of examples of how the mapping will work for this, or how we'll look in the new system. Again, on the left-hand side is the current implementation with the 2022 data standards. On the right side is the 2024. So for gender, if female is selected already, on October 1st, it will be changed to woman, girl, of child. In the second example, if you have male selected as well as a gender other than singularly female or male, in October 1st, that will be changed to boy, man, boy of child, and non-binary. Then for the last example here, if you choose more than two things, female, transgender questioning, in the new 2024 data standards, it will look as women, girl of child, transgender, and questioning. So again, gender is still going to remain multi-select, so you'll be able to choose different identity or different genders. One thing to keep in mind is that choosing client doesn't know, client prefers not to answer, data not collected. If you choose any of those, it won't allow you to choose a gender. So you can't have a combination of any of the available genders and a answer of client doesn't know, client prefers not to answer, and data not collected. So for destinations, there is a change in which there is now a dependency pick list for if you choose rental by client with an ongoing subsidy. Previously in the 2022 implementation, rental by client had responses for each individual subsidy. Now it's kind of all consolidated into one. So the way that that's going to look is on the right-hand side here, the screenshot on the right-hand side. So we'll have our destination. If you choose rental by client with an ongoing housing subsidy, it will then populate a rental subsidy type field in which you'll have to select what the actual subsidy is. So the way that this is going to be mapped, if the previous destination's answer is one of the values in the list below, then the new destination will be set to rental by client with an ongoing subsidy, and the rental subsidy type will be set to match the old destination value. So if previously you have a client exit as rental by client with GPD tip housing subsidy, once October 1st hits, the destination will be changed to rental by client with an ongoing housing subsidy, and the rental subsidy type will be GPD. So I have two examples here. The example at the top, we have a previous destination of rental by client with rapid housing or equivalent subsidy. The way that that's going to map over and look in the 2024 data standards would be that the destination will change to rental by client with ongoing housing subsidy, and the rental subsidy type would be rapid housing or equivalent subsidy. And then similar to if the destination was rental by client with housing choice voucher, it would be updated to rental by client with ongoing subsidy as the destination, and the subsidy type would be housing choice voucher. Are there any questions on destination? Okay, so federal reports and exports. All federal reports and exports will be updated with the fiscal year 2024 changes. These changes will be updated by the vendor. So the system performance measures, LSA, APR, CAPER, data quality framework, have coordinated entry APR, point in time, and housing inventory count reports, as well as the CSV upload file. So the traditional CSV export, the hash CSV, which is primarily used for RAI, and then SSVF export. Okay, we have one question. Will it map if you choose rental by client with other ongoing subsidy? So if you just have that selected, it will not map to any particular subsidy. It would just map to the rental by client with ongoing subsidy, and the rental by subsidy type would be no. So if a client leaves AWOL and did not complete program, what do we do in that situation? So this is more of kind of a programmatic question. So if you can you just submit this as a help desk ticket, and we can try to work through that situation with you. Okay, so for SSVF reports, fiscal year 2023 data must be submitted using the fiscal 2022 CSV. Final submissions for that report is due October 9th of 2023. For the APR, CAPER, and coordinated entry APR, SAGE will update on October 1st, 2023. SPMs and PAF, we don't have a date on when those will be updated by the vendor, but those are currently pending. Again, we strongly recommend that agencies with reporting deadlines near the end of September and the beginning of October submit their reports into SAGE or a specific funder before October 1st of 2023. This just helps to avoid any unnecessary delays caused by transitions to the 2024 reporting versions. Okay, so this is just kind of a chart that's showing when things will change and what the cutoffs are. So prior to September 30th, SAGE and the reports will be kind of within the fiscal year 2022 data standards. October 1st, everything will change over to fiscal year 2024. The SSVF is not going to switch over on October 1st. And we haven't got an exact date from the vendor, but my assumption is that it is after the submission, the final submission. Okay, so now we're going to just kind of go over the APR and CAPR changes. Many of the changes for the APR and the CAPR are to accommodate the new pick list values and updated tables for race and ethnicity and gender. So question 6A, new role. New role is added to the chronic homeless section to break out data quality for coordinated entry projects and street outreach, day shelters, or not street outreach, services only, day shelters, homeless prevention projects. Question 12, we'll be combining race and ethnicity into a single table. And then there are several questions that have been removed from the APR, which is question 25E, physical and mental health conditions for veterans. Question 25F, which is cash income for veterans. 25G, type of cash income sources for veterans. Question 25I, the type of non-cash benefit sources for veterans. Question 26F, clients' cash income for chronically homeless. Question 26G, type of cash income sources for chronically homeless. And question 26H, type of non-cash benefit sources for chronically homeless. So again, right now, these questions are included, or these questions are included in the fiscal year 2022 APR. And again, if you run this report on September 29th, which is the Friday, and you try to upload it on Monday, these questions will be a part of your export out of HMIS, but Sage will not recognize these questions anymore since it's not going to be a part of the fiscal year 2024 standards. There are new questions being added also. So question 22F is going to be a new question, and it will provide data on the length of time between project start and the housing move-in date by race and ethnicity. Question 22G will provide data on length of time prior to housing by race and ethnicity. 23E will provide data on destination by client or by race and ethnicity. 24B will provide data on move-on assistance for permanent housing projects. And then 24C will provide data on sexual orientation for permanent supportive housing projects. 24D will provide data on persons requiring translation assistance. 25J will provide exit destination rental subsidy data for veterans. 27F will provide exit destination rental subsidy data for youth. And 27M will provide education status data for youth. So for these new questions, we actually don't have the logic behind them just yet. HUD hasn't made the APR specs available on their website yet for us to take a look at. But as we find out more information, we will share that out. So this is just kind of an example of how race and ethnicity columns will be displayed. So if you look at the screenshot here, columns B through H are representing all of the different race and ethnicities that's available in the pick list. I and J are going to be identifying multi-race. So for someone to fall within column I, they will have to have a combination of races as well as Hispanic selected for them to fall into I, and then J will be a combination of the different races without Hispanic being included. Okay, we have one question. Do you know what the rationale for HUD collecting data on sexual orientation is? Our staff hates it, as do our clients. It's really none of HUD's business. It's not required, correct? Yes, unfortunately, this question is required by HUD. Within the data standard, they probably talk a little bit more about the reasoning behind it. So we're going to kind of move over to the point in time count and the housing inventory. This is just really brief over of what potential changes are going to affect these reports. As the months go, or within the next couple of months, we will be sending out documentation on the new workflow and having webinars to go more in depth about the process. This is just really going over the new data standards and how it's going to affect these individual reports. So for the point in time count, emergency shelters has expanded to two separate types. And these types are identified by night or entry and exit. Previously, all emergency shelter projects were captured as night by night, utilizing shelter point lists to verify a client stays for the night. So what that means is that only for the point in time count, we utilize the shelter point unit list to actually track how many clients stayed in your project for that night. Going forward, we will be using the entry and exit numbers to calculate that for projects that identify as being an emergency shelter entry and exit project. Projects that are night by night will continue doing the shelter point unit list inventory, but going forward, projects that are identified as emergency shelter entry and exit will be tracking clients staying the night at a point in time count from the project enrollments. And then for the HIC, rapid housing project types now has a subtype which indicates that the project is services only or provides housing. Projects identified as rapid housing services only will not need bid inventory. So that's going to be a change to the housing inventory count. So if you have a rapid housing project that is services only, I don't believe we have any in our continuum, but if there are any, please let us know. But if you do have one, there's no need to have a bid inventory tied to that project. If you have any questions about your project inventory or about anything related to this process, just submit a help desk ticket and we can walk through that with you. Okay, and I'm gonna pass it back over to Mike to go over custom reporting.
Okay, thanks. Thanks, Alex. So we're going to need to do, we have a bunch of custom reports that we've developed within the CoC that will also need to be updated between now and October 1st, and in some cases it might go past October 1st. Some examples of the DFSS quarterly reports: system goals, data quality reporting, active list, coordinate entry list, the veterans active list, FHP, SIT, match to enrollment, and the dashboard on the public website. That's not a complete list, just examples. And the impact of the changes on the reports and dashboards. Right now, race and ethnicity are separate values in the system and separate columns on reports that include demographics. So those columns will need to be removed and the race and ethnicity column will need to be added. The gender values and categories will reflect the new man, woman replacing male and female. That should happen pretty automatically. Where we do groupings, like on the dashboard, to aggregate those things, we'll need to change the terminology on the dashboards. Destination values and types will reflect the new permanent and temporary designations and the new subsidy value, but that additional question about the type of subsidy will not automatically be added into any reporting. So that's something that's needed in some of those reports. we'll have to have that conversation and set a schedule for doing that. Where we do selection by the program types, the 2 new emergency shelter program types will need to be added into the selection list. And if we do any aggregation by program type, we'll need to aggregate both of those emergency shelter types into a single emergency shelter one. So all that changed to make sure the display and the aggregation is correct. And again, as a contingency, we suggest that reports due in early October be run at the end of September to avoid operational issues on reports being late or delays arising from any of the version migration stuff. Just looking at the various questions here. The ETH, which is needed for IDHS quarterly reports. Is that a report name or are you referring to the ethnicity data? Okay. I'll make sure to make a note of that. So one of the things that we're working on, as I mentioned at the beginning, is for the custom CoC reports that are operational in nature that usually go out on Mondays, which would be normally sent out on Monday, October 2nd. We'll probably send those out ahead of time on Saturday, September 30th to make sure that those reports are all in people's hands so that they can continue whatever they need to do the week of October 2nd. That would mean that the reports might miss a day's worth of activity on Saturday, but hopefully that won't be significant. If you have other funder required reports that are due at the end of September, again, try to get those done prior to October 1st if you have them completed. The SSVF, the final submissions are due by October 9th. And again, if those can be submitted early, that'll be a good avenue to pursue. Alex, did you want to go through the resource part?
Yes. So we do have just 2 links here for resources. The top link here is for the HUD Exchange, for the data dictionary, the data standards manual, and for the C4 translation assistance needed supplement. So there's additional documentation via this link, but this is the best place to start to kind of get more in-depth understanding of the data standard changes. And then also we have a link to our help desk article on the 2024 data standard changes. This article will be updated with the slides from the various recordings and any additional information regarding the data standard changes. And again, we're here to help. So if there's any questions or if you want to set time to kind of go over any of this, please submit a ticket to helpdesk@allchicago.org. And we're going to save a little bit of time for questions. Okay, it doesn't appear that we're getting any questions in. So again, well, we have one question here. So for the DFSS quarterly report due on October 6th, is your guidance to run that report early, even though by doing so, we will shorten the reporting period by a few days? So for the DFSS quarterly reports, we really don't have any guidance as of yet on how you should go about that. We are, again, in contact with DFSS and they are aware of these changes. Nothing definitive has been decided yet. So I do expect for DFSS to send out communication on how to move forward with that. Okay, we have another question. Is there a reason behind changing the choices from male, female to man, woman? So this is a HUD change. This is a change that we have no control over. But there potentially could be a better explanation within the data standards. And I can provide you with that link. Then we have a question. If we put in data not collected for race, will that cause an error? So again, responses of data not collected, client preferred not to answer. Those are considered missing data by HUD. So even with the data standard change, those have not changed. So it will still be considered as missing data. Okay, please feel free to ask any additional questions. Okay, gender is male, woman, etc. While male, female is referred to sex. This is updated to reflect reality. Okay. Again, if there's any additional questions, please feel free to ask away. But this is kind of concludes our webinar. So feel free to drop off. Give everybody 13 minutes back of their time. But if you do have questions, please feel free to ask them in the question section. Again, thank you everyone for joining. All right, thank you everyone. We're going to conclude the webinar now.